I think you'll find tonight's program very interesting, to say the least, and leads us into, again, our March 2nd meeting, and I want to make sure that I tell you now to please mark your calendars for that last community session. So before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Remember that the restrooms are out and to your right. If you have not signed in, please sign in on your way out. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Robin Randall, who will lead us through tonight's agenda. Rob?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you so much for coming out on this cold winter night. Hopefully the warm-up trend is going to head our way this weekend, but it's great to have you here, and I appreciate your time. I want to be respectful of that time and make sure we're completed by 9 o'clock tonight. So the agenda tonight is just to review the existing facilities very quickly, and then we're going to go in and define some terms, and we're going to give you some tools and some toys to play with tonight. How many of you, again, raise your hand if you are an architect or a wannabe architect? Good, good. I'm glad you're here. This is the night that we get to start to solve the problem. This is, yeah, there might be some engineers as well here. Up until this point, we have been defining the problem, and we have all of those meeting minutes and gathered all of that information. So that's one of the tools that you're going to have at your stations. And then we get to start to solve the problem tonight. We want you to generate as many concepts for solving the problem with the tools that you have. And we all have our iPhones out. We're going to document those concepts. We also are going to have a session where we talk about the overall district and understanding what the district needs are, potentially restructuring the district. That's the conversation that we want to have tonight. And that group will report back first and really lead the discussion at the end of the workshops. So exciting times today, and I just want to turn it over to Paul Garland with Leggett King Scott. He's going to take us through a brief summary of the existing facilities and the utilization study to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and good evening. One of the neat things that Shaker Heights is doing is they're looking at all opportunities and avenues as far as where we're going with the facilities, and one of them being the Ohio School Facilities Commission. And what they do is they look and work with every school district within the state of Ohio and try to get them funding in order to pay for a portion of the buildings. So when they look at that option, and if the school district decides to go down that route, then what we need to do is follow the Ohio School Design Manual, which is approximately 3,600 pages of stuff. They have every room laid out from a standard classroom to a storage closet. They tell you how many square feet these spaces need to be, how many linear feet of base cabinets are within a classroom. They really get down to the nitty-gritty. What was done originally is a facility assessment was completed for the schools, and they compared that, or what I did is I compared the assessment to the existing buildings and how it relates to that school design manual. So it's really interesting on how, and when I was talking to the executive committee last week, I started out by saying there's going to be some eye rolling, there's going to be some moaning and groaning, because if you look strictly number for number, because that's what the OSFC does, they don't look at curriculum, they don't look how the district is teaching. It's just number of students, budget, and square footage of space. And if you look strictly at those numbers, all of your existing buildings should work fine. Hence the eye roll and the, oh yeah, right. Because everyone's been. So what we did is, and we've got it in a bigger picture, but we narrowed it down. But here's a few examples of the spaces. So all the elementary schools, you have an average of 755 square feet for all the elementary classes. According to the Ohio School Design Manual, it should be around 900 square feet is the recommended size. So our existing classrooms are about 17% smaller than what the design manual recommends. The pre-K and kindergarten classrooms, are an average of 1,125 square feet. The design manual is recommending 1,200, so we're pretty good there, about 6% smaller. Art and music classrooms, their average is about 1,000 square feet, where the OSDM requires or recommends 1,200 square feet, so you're about 40% smaller than what the recommendation is. And the more interesting I found is as the kids got bigger, so you went from the middle school or elementary to the middle school to the high school, the average classroom size got smaller and smaller. So it was working in reverse. So the middle school, the average square foot of a classroom is 676 square feet versus the 900. So you're looking at about 25% smaller space. At the high school, you're at 616 square feet and compared to 900. So it's about 32% smaller. So when the OSFC looks at these numbers and they provide an estimate and a budget to bring up the existing buildings to the standards, it is strictly just for the building components, windows, doors, finishes, roof, mechanical systems, and space. It does not take into consideration reprogramming of spaces. So if you have a classroom that's 600 square feet and there's two side by side, they don't pay for that wall to come down to make it a 1,200 square foot classroom. So the other component they have within that is what they call as a 2/3 rule. So after the assessment, if they determine that the cost to renovate the existing facility is 2/3 of the cost of building a new facility, they would recommend building a new facility. Now, the school district can decide, no, we like our existing facilities, and we'll continue on and improve upon those, but then most of that extra money will come out of a pot of money called the locally funded initiative. So basically, it's 100% cost to the school district. It wouldn't be any share with the state. So it's just another one of those pieces of pie to consider as we move forward with this process. Thank you.
Any questions for Paul at this point? Yes. When do they figure out the budget for the 2/3 rule?
They do that at the time of the assessment. So most of those numbers are just about complete. I believe Jill's office, Van Elkenakens, they're vetting the assessment team's work to confirm the numbers and pricing. But once that's set, that kind of defines that.
So by March 2nd? So by March 2nd, we'll have those numbers and all the budget numbers, estimates for the concepts that you're developing tonight, too. So March 2nd, actually, we can jump to that quick discussion. March 2nd will be a time when you'll get to take a look and develop pros and cons for the concepts that you've developed tonight. And then we're going to give you a sticker that's yellow, red, and green, and gauge your excitement for each of those concepts. So it's an exciting time. Usually it's a consensus building time. We're pleasantly surprised that a lot of the green dots go on the same concepts. So that's what you have in store for you, but that's how important tonight is developing all the options that you would like to see as solutions to the problem that you've defined. Other questions? All right, so we're going to go into now a time where we're going to define a series. We have 7 different vocabulary terms that we'd like you to use tonight. And they came straight out of the Define session last time. We also have some images and then also a series of videos that we want to share with you tonight fairly quickly. So the Define session overview, can I get a show of hands for those of you who have been at the Define session last time? Excellent. Series of hands of people, this is your first time here? Excellent, thank you. Thank you for coming out and joining us. So the first program area is the Global Learning Node. And what that is a collaborative space. It's not a classroom. It's something outside of a classroom where 2 or more classes can come together, small group learning, larger group learning, and you're going to have a tool to represent that. The next program area is the International Baccalaureate Exhibition Space. This is the fun space. We've actually given you a red ribbon that's going to denote this. But we know that you would like a space to exhibit the exciting things that you're learning outside of your classroom. So we've put together a video about a high school renovation that it speaks to that exposure and exhibit space that we'd like you to take a look at. Thanks. Actually inserted in an existing facility an atrium space that actually flowed all the way from the basement to a 4th floor, exhibiting space all around, maker spaces all surrounding this centerpiece with arts, music, science, all the way up to the library, which was at the top piece. So we wanted you to see an opportunity that can happen within an existing facility. The word flexibility. Does everyone know what flexibility means? This is really important. Flexibility, adaptability. We don't know the curriculum that you're going to be delivering in 5 years. We want these spaces to be flexible and interchangeable. So we have a video that we'd like, hopefully, to share with you about that.
The energy in the iLab is greater than the energy in my classroom.
The kids are definitely engaged when they're using it.
You really have space to create and to think.
That space can actually influence that personal interaction.
Like you could choose a corner and not be disturbed, or you could talk with everybody.
The students were more engaged. Some of the people who are usually less involved were speaking.
And I just really see the iLab as being something that can help spark them into thinking beyond.
Does an agile learning space affect teaching and learning? Can a physical learning space be more interactive? Hillbrook School, Bretford Manufacturing, and Hero, a research and consulting firm, set out on a 2-year research project investigating how physical learning space affects student behavior. The three examined the impact of adaptive agile learning spaces on student performance, confidence, engagement, and learning. Together, they developed an experimental learning space called the IDEA Laboratory, or iLab for short. What's an iLab? The iLab was built at Hillbrook as a replacement for an aging computer lab. Hillbrook decided to pilot a one-to-one iPad program in their middle school. Quickly and almost organically, the flow of the classroom began to shift. Teachers could easily transition from introducing content to enabling individual or collaborative work. Teaching and learning had suddenly become more agile, and learning spaces needed to adapt. How is an iLab different from a traditional classroom? In a word, it's agile. The iLab is a student-focused learning space where teachers or students can arrange mobile furnishings and technology to suit their immediate need. How does it work? The iLab is a community and experimental space that has a room reset. Each time students and teachers enter the room, it's a blank canvas that can be arranged any way for whatever the purpose. What can you do in the iLab? Move, sit, stand, listen, build, meet, work on projects, but mostly explore, experiment, experience. Do students like the iLab?
I think working in the iLab is amazing because you can set up any way you want.
If every classroom was like the iLab, you could adjust your workspace to your own needs.
It's completely your choice of what you want to do. You can move a table to the middle of the room, or you can keep a ring on the outside.
But it's amazing for things like science, building things, and it's also great for like the teacher talking and us like taking notes.
It's pretty much like the ultimate workroom.
I feel like I'm more free to do something that I want to do.
What do teachers say about the iLab?
I just really see the iLab as being more conducive for the creation of ideas. There's more flexibility and openness.
It changes the personal interaction in a way. Sometimes like I'll go and I'll pull a chair up and just slide it in and sit down.
In this space, you can adapt the room to the needs of the lesson.
60% of the students who usually aren't involved and don't contribute to conversations contributed during the iLab class.
You know, the kids that are used to space is helpful because they know how they work best.
I would love it if my classroom was an iLab.
How does the iLab affect learning?
It has to do with knowing each individual's learning style, which has to do with physical space.
They're looking at the classroom and then deciding which will be their space. That sense of autonomy is a necessity. I'm trying to encourage them to be able to fly on their own.
We're trying to foster problem solving that's going to help them to succeed in life.
The 2-year research project revealed exciting results. Behavior in the iLab is different. Both students and teachers exhibited more energy, engagement, mobility, and interaction with each other and their environment. As a highly agile learning space, the iLab enables a wide variety of configurations and thinking with the same kit of parts. Also, the iLab is preferred and has changed how teachers think about a traditional learning space. Ask a Bretford representative for a copy of the Hillbrook iLab Research Summary, and for more information, visit hillbrookilab.com.
So does everybody understand what flexibility can be and what it might look like? Questions about that? How many of you would like to work in an iLab? All right. I just want to really express also, did you note that the exterior of the building actually was fairly historical and the interior of the building was very modern? Just wanted to point that out. You had a question out here? Yes. So I'm going to give you an answer that could work for you, yes and yes. I think it's up to you what it's used for. This is the design element. You're the architect tonight. You get to decide what you need and where it should go. In this case, it's a separate, it's a converted computer lab, and individual classes and individual teachers could go and use it. And it's an experimental lab that they're going to apply to their other learning labs. Any other questions about flexibility? Okay, moving on to program area 4, which is sustainability. We want to think about sustainability as inspired by nature, and there's this great quote over here from Marc Chagall that I noticed in the room. Great art picks up where nature ends. We want to show a video about biomimicry. Who's heard of this term before? Great. So you can be the educators in your group.
Biomimicry is innovation inspired by nature. It's the process of looking at something like a leaf and trying to figure out how to make a better solar cell. It's become popular in the design disciplines, mainly I think because people are looking for more sustainable ways to do things. And organisms know how to do this. After 3.8 billion years, life has learned what works and what's appropriate on the planet. And right now, that's what the people trying to redesign our world are looking for. What we do in biomimicry is we bring in biologists to the design table. We look at how does nature contain liquids? How does nature repel water? So for instance, go outside, look at any leaf and the veins in a leaf, and what you're seeing is the world's best water distribution network. There's an amazing thing called the Murray's Law that says that all branching structures in the natural world, including our lungs, they all follow a single mathematical formula. And it has to do with the pipe branches, and it drops down to a smaller diameter, and then it branches again, and that drops down to a smaller diameter, and that's predictable. People in green building now are starting to say, well, maybe our 90-degree angles that we have in plumbing are really friction devices. Maybe we should distribute electricity differently in a building, water differently in a building, even gases, even air conditioning differently in a building by mimicking this Murray's Law in our plumbing. The most important thing that people should know is that a sustainable world already exists. We're just now beginning to open our eyes and realize that the answers to the questions we've been asking, how do we live here sustainably, are all around us.
Sustainability, everyone understand that? Thanks for getting the lights. Nobody fall asleep on me though. We're almost there. So we want you to think about that in terms of outdoor learning and also about indoor learning and how do you integrate nature within the building. Those classrooms and learning studios, we're going to talk about them as what you need for education spaces too, but what do they need to be adjacent to, and do they need to have transparency between them? And we're going to identify a way to communicate that. The resource teacher and student spaces, what do you need to support what you're teaching? What do the students need to support what they're learning? How do we put those adjacencies in the right place as well? The visual connections, that's that transparency that I talked about. As you're walking down the hallway, do you want the 9th grader to see what the 12th grader is learning and get excited about what the opportunity is? Do you want to have the middle schooler be able to see what the potential is too? So seeing that transparency and understanding that other students are inspiring the next learner, right? You want to see that vibrancy. You want to see what's happening in your schools so that the students get excited and the other teachers get excited too. So these are the tools that we want you to use, and I'm going to have Catherine take you through the elements that we're going to use tonight to define how these concepts go together.
At each group, there will be a key identifying the different elements that could be puzzle pieces to design your ideal school. So there'll be several different color Post-it notes at the table. With these, write down the space that you want there. So, and they're also defined by programmatic categories. So pink is classrooms, blue is arts and music, Orange is those resource spaces, both teacher and student. And then yellow is science spaces. For those visual transparencies, as you begin to lay out your Post-it notes, think about adjacencies, but also think about rooms that maybe want to look into other rooms or have connections from the corridor as well. And if you can draw a dashed line to indicate that with an arrow. So the IB exhibition spaces, that's going to be denoted with this ribbon. So somehow just attach it to the plan, begin to integrate it or weave it throughout the entire school. Again, back to the Post-it notes. Green is that sustainable and outdoor learning spaces, a lighter blue for athletics, and then a darker purple for performance and presentation spaces. And again, there's a key at everyone's tables, so you don't have to memorize this. It'll be there, and there'll also be an architect around, and if you have any questions, just ask them. They're glad to help. Play-Doh will also be those global learning nodes, and it can also be a way to attach the ribbon as well. And then to denote flexible space, either draw on a Post-it note. If it's going to be multi-purpose, draw a triangle or just draw it on the plan to let us know spaces that you think could be shared use or have flexible furniture, just to sort of begin to indicate those spaces as well. Any questions? Resources. So as you can use the orange and just indicate that it's admin. So all the spaces, all the Post-it notes are going to need to be written on as to more specific programmatic elements. These are just the categories, but resource. And there is a key. And if there's a space that you're not sure what category it falls under, you can use any color. It's just to begin to easily visually see what spaces are what and sort of at a quick glance. Any other questions?
So, thank you, Catherine. So we have until 9 o'clock. We want to step that back. We would like to start to report back at 8:30. So we have a full 55 minutes now to work the plan. Okay. So questions? I heard someone's voice. Yes. What are bathrooms? That's a really good question. I think we could come up, I think you could use Play-Doh as that. You could use, certainly they could be sustainable. You could use the green for that. Good question though. We're concentrating on learning spaces, but certainly you're gonna learn toilets too. Any other questions? All right, so here's how we'd like to play the game. And it truly is a game. We want this to be fun, but it is very serious in the sense that we want a series of solutions and concepts. We are going to divide in the usual suspect areas. So middle school will be over here in the corner. Thank you for all your work tonight. Any overall comments that we want to share while we're setting up the district discussion? Did you have fun tonight? Yeah. Good. Okay. Does it feel like you're actually making progress? Yes. Okay. So we will take these options. We will document them. You will get to give us feedback in terms of pros and cons for each of these options. At the March 2nd, we will have budget numbers related to that overall budget. Yes. I appreciate that feedback because what we found is if the architect is there guiding too much, sometimes it works in reverse. So, but I think that's a really valid comment. And that's in the high school group, right? Elementary schools? Okay. The high school group really got into it, and there were like 5 different groups going, and it's, there are very distinct options. And so I think that's good feedback too, in terms of how different people engaged with the process. Yeah. Other comments? Well, I want to thank you, but I want to get to this discussion. So can we ask the representative for the district-wide discussion to come up? Thank you.
Okay, so we talked about a lot of things in the group first of what were things that we would need to consider when we looked at possibly reconfiguring grades or looking at new buildings and where they would be and how that would work. And the themes that came up over and over, one of the number one themes that came up was that we want to try to minimize the number of transitions that our students are making. And the transition of 2 years at Woodbury and 2 years at the middle school isn't working out to maybe be the healthiest thing that we're finding for our students. So that came up over and over. We looked at the transition from an elementary school model to a middle school model as it exists right now between 6th grade and 7th grade. Isn't always effective for our students. We looked at curricular decisions around it, how state standards are banded right now, how IB tends to ban schools by putting 5th grade with pre-K 4, so pre-K 5, and how MYP really starts in 6th grade, and how that might play out. We talked about the maturity level of students and how students should be grouped together based on maturity level and what would be best for them. We looked at maintaining the idea of neighborhood schools and not creating competition between neighborhoods as the grades get older, and looking at the idea of how we split families across buildings when there's children, different buildings, different age levels across families. And so we came up with 4.5 ideas, or really 5 ideas that we wanted to put out there to you guys. One idea was having one preschool and kindergarten building as just a standalone, and then having 4 grades 1 through 4 buildings, creating 2 5-8 buildings, one on each side of town, and maintaining a 9-12 high school. So that was one option we looked at. A second option we looked at was keeping the pre-K 4 structure and the 9-12 structure similar to how it is now, but creating 2 separate buildings for 5, 6, and 7, 8, but on a shared campus, so that there could be a lot more communication and collaboration between the two. That then sort of morphed into the third idea of, again, maintaining the pre-K 4 buildings in the structure that they are right now, and constructing a new 5-8 building on the site of the current middle school, and then maintaining the high school how it is, and that would free up Woodbury for, as it stands right now, for a host of options, including possibly having the preschool or pre-K options at Woodbury, possibly moving district offices or condensing satellite offices for the district all into one place, having a professional learning space, an alternative learning space, potentially district library, or the Bertram Wood branch of the library moving into that space of Woodbury, looking at using it as fitness space, all different types of multi-purpose use space that could be used for both district needs and community needs on the site of where Woodbury is right now. And one advantage to that too is that we could build a new 5-8 building on the athletic sites that the middle school sits on now without disrupting the actual middle school building in the process, and then relocate the current middle school athletic sites to where the building is now. So you could potentially build a new building without disrupting the current flow of classes during a construction period. And then the fourth idea was to have an independent preschool and pre-K building, have 5 K-5 buildings, and then having a 6-8 building, and then maintaining the high school. And then our sort of fifth idea that could potentially integrate into any of these was looking at a 9th grade academy, a 9th grade building that might be a separate transition space going into high school, somewhere in close proximity to where the high school is or would be in one of these new plans, so that 9th graders would have a transition space of their own, but also in proximity to the rest of the high school for upper level courses and more specific elective courses. So those are the options that we put out on the table from our discussions. Are there questions?
What was there data or some kind of other some kind of background to the 9th grade academy idea?
Where did Reed go? Where did Mr. Reed go? He brought that up. Oh, there you are. I'm like, Mr. Reed, you brought that up. So.
I just think in terms of our most challenged group at the high school are those 9th graders, and challenged by all sorts of things, challenged by kind of the bigness of the place, some of the curricular loads, some of the social things that pull them away. So it's always good to have the 9th graders have a great start, so that they're their movement into the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades are not hindered by, being behind. I think even research shows that developmentally, the difference between a 14-year-old, maybe a 14-year-old ninth grader, 15-year-old ninth grader, and a 16-year-old 10th grader, 17, is large, even though that year we think doesn't make a great deal of difference to those of us that are old. It does to students. And so if we could get them a great start, I just think that it might help us with ninth grade and that transition into the high school. All over the country, ninth graders are the most challenged group of high schoolers. And so it's just an idea that I think might have some merit, at least for discussion.
Any other questions?
Amy, when you talked about reconfiguring, like you said, building new 5-8 building and a middle school field, then after that's all done, what would you use the middle school building for?
That would then get knocked down and we've created the athletic fields on it. So they'd switch spaces, but it would allow for construction without relocating a student population during it.
I wanted to add your idea with having K-5 buildings, so the IB program, like 5th graders are supposed to do exhibition, and currently we have 4th graders doing exhibition.
That is what came up in our idea for that as well, which is why those are labeled as K-5 PYPs and a 6-8 MYP as opposed to just buildings.
Is there not any concern about putting the 5th graders with the 8th graders? I mean, already I've expressed some concern putting the 5th graders with the 6th graders.
That definitely came up as a concern at our table too.
One of the things we mentioned was having them kind of sharing middle space, but having separate areas, 7 and 8 maybe on one side, 5 and 6, and you could share cafeteria, auditorium, gym space, swimming pool, that type of stuff. So there is some separation.
By building a new campus for that age level, it would allow us to design it in a way that would make the most sense for our students.
Was there any consideration given to like a junior high idea, 7, 8, 9?
Back to the 7, 8, 9, Woodbury Byron.
We did not consider that idea.
That would at least, isolate the ninth graders to some extent, as they're becoming their high school record is starting.
Thank you for the feedback. We did not consider that. The question was there any consideration to going back to a junior high model of 7, 8, 9 in one building? And it's an interesting idea and one that we had not considered in our ideas here.
It does in the
It just wasn't something that came up in our table discussion. Absolutely. I mean, we did mention in here alternative learning space, and sorry, the question, thank you, was is there any consideration to, if Woodbury becomes an open facility, having the 9th grade academy potentially there, and also maybe moving the IC over. The IC was, both were conversations. The IC made it up here in the idea of an alternative learning space as moving over. We talked about 9th grade coming over and the feasibility of that, and that was a possibility at Woodbury. The concerns that were brought up were just for 9th graders who were taking classes that may be housed here, is it feasible to get here back and forth in a schedule? But it definitely was brought up. So.
Something to consider with a 5 through 8 building would be having 2 separate schedules for your 5-6 portion of the building as opposed to your 7-8. I don't know if that surfaced in the larger conversation, but to keep more of that separation.
Yeah, it didn't come up, but I think that's, I mean, it did in the sense that we talked about how to transition from moving from an elementary school model to a middle school model. The question was, would there be separate schedules? If maintaining separate schedules in a 5-6 building and then in a 7-8 building that were housed on one campus, would that help in aiding some of the separation? And it came up mainly in our conversation about the rough transition right now from an elementary model to a middle school model and sort of throwing our kids over the cliff into the middle school and saying, figure it out independently. And so I think along with a new building design would have to come questions about scheduling and how that would best work. The comment was a con to the plan of having 2 separate 5-8 buildings and saying that by combining the earlier we combine students into one group as a district, the better it seems to be for students from the perspective of somebody who went through the 2 separate splits and then had kids go through the split all together at Woodbury. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
March 2nd, please be here. It's so important. It's the culmination of all the workshop. It's all the hard work that you've put in. We need you here to evaluate it and to select your most excited option for each of the buildings, and then for the district-wide options that were just discussed. Questions about March 2nd? Thank you again for being here. Please bring your friends and family to March 2nd as well. Thanks so much.